bus stops, crazy weather, and intense battles going down to the wire. These are just a few ways to describe the Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen. This year's race is shaping up to be a classic with 56 entries and plenty of storylines to follow. This is the Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen race preview. The third race of the Michelin Endurance Cup takes us to beautiful upstate New York and the village of Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen has a long and storied history in motorsports that has made it one of the most famous circuits in North America. Located in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, Watkins Glen began its racing history in 1948 on a 6.6 mile or 10.6 kilometer race course that ran around the village. Unfortunately, after about 5 years and a handful of terrible accidents that occurred in some of the races, the need for a purpose-built racetrack was realized. And actually, if you find yourself in Watkins Glen, you can still drive the old course, which is a pretty fun activity, and I'd highly recommend you do it. But in 1956, that's when the new Watkins Glen track, the dedicated race course, would hold its first race. Now, since this first race, there have been a number of large changes made to the facilities that have turned the course into what it is today. Today, the 11-turn 3.4 mile or 5.47 kilometer circuit features 115 feet of elevation change. And one of the headlining events that the track has hosted is the Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen. The track has hosted this race since 1968, with the exception of a couple of years in the 80s, and of course 2020 due to COVID, but the track has also hosted numerous other high-profile events, such as the Formula One United States Grand Prix, as well as a host of other series like NASCAR, IndyCar, SRO, and many more. Watkins Glen is a pretty quick track with a variety of medium and high-speed corners. As a result, lap times can vary for the GTPs down into the low 1-minute 30s, up to about the 1 minute and 46 seconds for the GTD classes. And there are some pretty good passing opportunities around here. One of which is into turn 1 at the end of the long front straightaway. If you're feeling bold, then you can dive down the inside heading into the inner loop, aka the bus stop. And there's some nice passing opportunities into the boot portion of the course, most notably into turn 8, or the heel of the boot. While it's 6 hours, this race is tied for the shortest Michelin Endurance Cup race on the season, but don't let that fool you. This race still requires the patience that many endurance races demand. At the same time though, and similar to a sprint race, it requires a virtually flawless performance from the driver and team if they want to find themselves on the podium. One of the keys to finding success at Watkins Glen is having patience, and most notably when you're navigating traffic. Watkins Glen is the first race in Sebring that will feature all 4 classes on the grid, which means that traffic is going to become a significant talking point once again. 56 cars on the grid on not a terribly long track means that traffic is going to be a big factor in determining this year's winner. In fact, I talked about traffic being a key storyline in this race in a recent episode. I'll link that up for you. Another thing to watch for though that has crept in more and more in recent years is track limits. I hate watching out for track limits, and I especially hate when we end up hearing about track cutting penalties as a result of picking up too many track limits warnings. Thankfully, many of the tracks Imsa races on are pretty self-policing when it comes to track limits. You go off track, you're probably in the grass, in the gravel, you're losing time on your own. Don't need to worry about getting an additional penalty. But the Glen has some corners that have a lot of runoff area that can invite some generous track extensions from drivers if they choose to try and exploit that. Turn 1 sees a wide runoff on the exit of the corner, which is very tempting for drivers to run wide as they do in NASCAR, but if drivers abuse that this weekend, then expect them to get a penalty. The same goes for turn 10, a very wide and paved corner exit. It can be very inviting to run wide, although it doesn't set you up very well for the final corner on the track. But nonetheless, drivers will take advantage of it and can pick up a penalty as well. I was unable to find a list of the sheer number of track limits warnings that were given out last year, but it was a big factor throughout the weekend last year, and I expect that it'll be a big factor in this year's race as well. In addition to the typical problem spots that we see for track extensions around here, the bus stop may be joining this conversation. You see, they have new curbs that have been installed on the entrance of the bus stop. I actually spoke about this as well in a recent episode, but I think that these could be a big problem. You see, there are large turtle curbs that have replaced the existing curbing on the entrance to the bus stop. It makes it much less forgiving depending on the configuration of these curbs, and if they're made too aggressive, we could see cars almost getting launched as a result of these, or if we see them not aggressive enough, then it's just essentially going to be another patch of asphalt that drivers are going to try and exploit. Hopefully we find a nice happy medium in the configuration of these curbs, and it isn't really much of a talking point for this weekend. Fingers crossed. Let's quickly jump over and take a look at BOP now, starting with the GTP class. From where these cars were at the 6 hours of the gun last year, Acura is a kilogram heavier, but does have 1 extra megajoule of maximum stint energy. BMW sheds 8 kilograms of weight, but also sheds 5 kilowatts of maximum power and 6 megawatts of stint energy. Cadillac has put on 10 kilograms, lost a little bit of maximum power. And Porsche has gained 3 kilograms of weight, but also lost a bit of maximum power and lost a bit of maximum stint energy. The new car to the GTP class this year, the Lamborghini SC63, sheds 13 kilograms of weight from where it was at Sebring, sheds a little bit of maximum power, and also loses some maximum stint energy. In the GTD ranks, Acura has gained 10 kilograms of weight from where this car was last year, while BMW gains 20 kilograms of weight, Ferrari gains 30 kilograms of weight, and don't worry, it does not stop here. Lamborghini is 70 kilograms heavier from where they were last year, and on top of that, they also have a 1 millimeter smaller restrictor diameter. Lexus has gained 15 kilograms and also has a wider restrictor diameter, translating to some more power. McLaren has put on 45 kilograms from last year. Mercedes is 20 kilograms heavier, also featuring a 1 millimeter larger restrictor diameter. And the Porsche is also 20 kilograms heavier with a 1.5 millimeter larger restrictor diameter. As for the new cars, you might ask, well, there have been essentially no changes to most of them since the last round out at Detroit, but for the Ford Mustang, we do see a 2 millimeter larger air restrictor diameter, which translates to about 18.5 horsepower more than they were running in Detroit. 56 entries will be on the grid for this year's Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen, which is actually 1 less than we saw here on the grid last year. Despite that, though, we do have an increase in entries on all 4 categories with the loss of the LMP3 class. Starting in GTP, we will have 11 entries, that's 2 more than last year. In LMP2, we will see 13 entries, 4 more than last year. GTD Pro features 11 entries, that's an increase of 2, and GTD will see 21 entries, that is an increase of 1 from last year. 201 laps were turned by the victorious BMW M-Team RLL number 25 entry of Connor DeFilippi and Nick Yaloli in 2023. The other 2023 class winners were in LMP2, the 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry of George Kurtz, Ben Hanley, and Nolan Segal, who took the honors. While in LMP3, it was the number 74 Riley Motorsports machine, driven by Gar Robinson, Josh Burton, and Felipe Fraga, who won it for a 3rd year in a row. I wanted to note this because that means this year they're going to be going for their 4th victory in a row in the Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen. This time they'll be doing in the LMP2 class, but that is definitely something to keep an eye out for. In GTD Pro was the number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus of Jack Hawksworth and Ben Barnacote, and finally in GTD it was the number 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus of Frankie Montecalvo, Aaron Tielitz, and Parker Thompson, who took the win. An interesting stat about the GT classes here, the last 2 Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glens have been swept by the same team. The Heart of Racing won the GTD Pro and GTD class in 2022, and last year Vassar Sullivan backed that up by also winning the GTD Pro and GTD classes. As far as my picks go for this weekend, well, in GTP, it's bound to happen at some point. Give me the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac. They've been so strong this year on virtually every track that we've been to. A victory is bound to happen at some point. I think it could be this weekend at Watkins Glen. In LMP2, well, give me the 74 Riley. How can you not cheer for somebody going going for 4 in a row. But not only that, they've looked strong in the first couple of races of this year. They've quietly been going about their business and improving with each race. And in such a wide open class like LMP2, I think they could do it for a 4th year in a row. In GTD Pro, give me the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW. The BMWs have been pretty strong around here the last couple of years, and with a strong team in Paul Miller Racing that has made the jump up to the GTD Pro class, I think this could be the race where they break through and win their first race in GTD Pro. And finally, in the GTD class, give me the number 12 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. They won here last year, and surprisingly to this point in the season, they haven't picked up a victory yet. You'll recall that the number 89 entry went to Victory Lane in Long Beach. However, that number 12 victory has not visited Victory Lane yet. And with such a strong driver lineup, I think they're going to be really competitive this weekend, and I expect them to be on the top step of the podium come the end of the weekend. Editor Stu here, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the weather for this weekend. Things are very much up in the air and seem to be evolving and changing every day, but as of right now, it looks like it could be a hot and potentially rainy one this weekend, with forecasts seeing temperatures, anywhere from 91 degrees Fahrenheit or 33 degrees Celsius on Thursday, before cooling down to a race day temperature of 88 degrees or 31 degrees Celsius. But perhaps more importantly in all of this is the chance of rain. The weekend does see a chance of rain, and a fairly significant one at that. Right now is saying a 70% chance of showers, so keep your eyes peeled to Racecast Weather for when they release their race weekend forecast, because we could certainly see weather playing a big factor this weekend. Now let's take a look at the championship points presented by P1 Web Development. If you're looking for a custom website, then look no further than P1 Web Development. You can head to p1webdevelopment.com or click the first link in the description for more info. In GTP, it's the number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963 with 1,669 points. That is 70 more points than the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac, the number 6 Porsche, the number 31 Cadillac, and the number 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Acura round out the top 5. In LMP2, it's been a while since we've seen these cars on the grid, but they're back, and it's the number 18 Era Motorsports entry that leads with 741 points. The number 74 Riley is 127 points behind. The 04 CrowdStrike Racing, number 52 Inter Europol entry, and the number 22 United Autosports entry round out the top 5. In GTD Pro, it's Rexy, the number 77 AO Racing Porsche that lead with 1,359 points. That is 84 points ahead of the number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, the number 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW, and number 4 Corvette round out the top 5. And in GTD, it's number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes with 1,367 points. That is 213 points ahead of the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW, the number 120 Porsche, the number 32 Mercedes, and the number 43 Porsche round out the top 5. And since this is a Michelin Endurance Cup race, let's take a quick look at the leaders for the classes in those standings. In GTP, the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac holds a slim 1-point lead over the number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963. In LMP2, it's Era Motorsports and Inter Europol that are tied with 24 points, and they are just a single point ahead of the 04 CrowdStrike Racing entry. In GTD Pro, it's the number 1 Paul Miller Racing BMW who hold a 2-point lead over the Risi Competizione Ferrari. And in GTD, it's the number 57 Windward Racing Mercedes that holds a 2-point lead over the number 70 Inception Racing McLaren. There's plenty of racing going on at Watkins Glen this weekend, so let's buckle up and go through it all. On Friday, starting at 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time, it's race 1 for the Mustang Challenge. You can catch that on Imsa TV and Peacock. That's followed up at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time for the first race of the weekend for the Porsche Carrera Cup North America. You can catch that also on Imsa TV and Peacock. And rounding out the day at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time, it's race 1 for the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Series. You can also catch that on Imsa TV and Peacock. Flip the calendar over to Saturday, and it is a packed day. Starting early at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, it's race 2 for the Mustang Challenge. That goes on Imsa TV and Peacock. At 10:55 a.m., it's race 2 for the Porsche Carrera Cup, also available on Imsa TV and Peacock. Then at 12:50, it's the Michelin Pilot Challenge that goes for their 2-hour race. That is the S's 120. Kind of ironically close to a certain channel name. But anyways, and that will be available on Imsa TV and Peacock. Then at 3:25 Eastern Time, it will be WeatherTech Championship qualifying. You can also catch that on Imsa TV and Peacock. And rounding out the day, starting at 4:45 p.m. Eastern Time, will be the last Support Series race of the weekend, for race 2 for the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Series, and you can find that on Imsa TV and Peacock. The only race on Sunday is the Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen. It gets underway at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and you can catch the entirety of that race on Imsa TV and Peacock, as well as Imsa's YouTube channel. The opening stint of the race will also be on USA Network. Also, if you find yourself at the track this weekend, I'm going to be doing a meetup after the WeatherTech Championship qualifying. It's going to start at 5 p.m. Eastern Time at the S's Grandstand, and that'll get underway about 15 minutes after the start of the second Lamborghini Super Trofeo race. I hope to see a bunch of you there. Whether you're going to be watching this race at the track or watching it from the comfort of your home, this year's Sahlen 6 Hours of the Glen is going to feature a ton of storylines to keep you entertained. You can go and check out this video for 5 storylines you need to follow heading into this year's race. A huge shout out to all the channel supporters. If you too want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/offinthes or click the join button below. Once again though, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.